Hi, I'm Steve Ockenick, sports editor for Marshfield on Focus, and today we're talking to Mark Denniston, head football coach at Pittsville High School. Mark, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome. No problem.
Taking a look back at your team last year, 10-2. Second place in the Central Wisconsin Small, made it to a level 3 playoff game. Give us a little bit of a recap of last year's season.
Well, I think it was probably a season that most people would agree was not entirely expected. I think maybe there was a little bit of overachievement from our team, which made it very special. It's one of the more fun seasons that I have been a part of. Very enjoyable. We had a really excellent group of seniors that worked really hard and earned all of their success. And I think that the chance for them to advance to level 3 of the playoffs and have a very exciting season in terms of some very big wins. It was just a great experience, I think, for everybody involved.
So coming off of last year's season, looking into this year's season, who do you have coming back that you're expecting a lot from this year?
Well, probably our two biggest key returning players would be Cade Weedman, who was an all-conference offensive lineman and linebacker, and Eli Fox, who last year was sort of a slot type player on offense, second team all-conference, and then a defensive player of the year in the conference at linebacker. So those two are certainly probably our biggest returning keys. And then we have a couple other guys that played a little bit. Matthew Kistner last year played some on defense, and this year he'll be our starting quarterback. So certainly he'll be an important player for us. And then Evan Dahman started at cornerback last year, and he will start 2 ways this year. And so out of that senior class, those are probably the key guys that will have to lead the way for the younger ones.
Okay. And obviously every year you're always replacing, in high school sports, you're always replacing someone. So who do you see as some of the new players that are coming up that might be key to your team this year?
Well, I mentioned Matthew. Whoever your quarterback is, that's a pretty important position. And Matthew so far has looked very good in practice. And tomorrow we have our scrimmage, and it'll be interesting to see how he does against live defense. But I think Matthew will be a big key for us. And then some younger guys. We'll have a few sophomores playing. Aiden Kohler will probably get a fair amount of time in the backfield at running back. Joey Redmond will play a little bit at receiver and start probably at linebacker on defense. And then probably the biggest key overall will be, I think, our offensive line and defensive line, and it'll be some of the same guys. One of the challenges for us this year will be trying to find some depth in those areas. We don't have a lot of big guys, and so we're going to have to do what we can there. And so for some of those incoming juniors, guys like Wyatt Lanfear, Gabe Mapes, even like some of the seniors, Eric Neve and Austin Fox, Landon Wierski, up front, really on both sides of the ball, it's going to be important that they play well.
Okay. Obviously, we're just wrapping up the first couple weeks of practice. First games aren't until next week. But have you kind of thought at all about what you're expecting from this team this year and what those expectations are?
Yeah, I think that we don't typically. I'm not a big fan of putting unrealistic expectations out there or pie in the sky kind of stuff. I think you don't do your team any favors when you do that. So we're not talking about right now winning a state championship or anything like that. But we're kind of, I think, taking it 1 week at a time. I know that's a cliche, but that's kind of where we're at. With the number of new players this year, I think it's going to take a little while to see exactly where we're at. The scrimmage will tell us tomorrow initially, where we're at, and then with a tough week 1 game, we'll get a good indication. But I'd like to think that this year we can hopefully be near the top of the conference, competing well with those teams, and I think that getting into the playoffs would be a nice goal for us as well. And if we can do those two things, if we put ourselves in positions to compete, then you don't know what'll happen.
Okay. Obviously, you talked about your week 1 game. We all remember last year's Week 1 game you guys had here against Auburndale, double overtime, broke up a pass and a 2-point conversion to win. What does it mean to start off the season with a big non-conference rivalry game like that?
Well, it's always high intensity. I think that even though it wouldn't matter if it's the first game or the last week of the season. I think it's always going to be a hard-fought game. Just the rivalry has been there for many, many years, and the two communities being pretty close, it's always been a good game. So I anticipate it's going to be no different this year. I'm sure Auburndale, with what happened last year, will probably come out really jacked up and ready to try to avenge that maybe a little bit. So we're going to have to be ready to go. I think both teams maybe lost a bit from last year, and so it'll be interesting maybe to see whose newer and younger players can step up the quickest.
Now, obviously, looking ahead one more year, this will be the last year with the current conference alignments. Any teams you're excited to see coming up in 2020?
Well, I think we'll keep most of the teams that are going to be in our conference this year, and so it'll just be a matter of adding a few teams. The one I think that probably stands out as being kind of interesting will be Assumption. The last 2 years in the playoffs, we've played them in level 1 games both years, and unfortunately we were able to come out ahead in each of those contests. But I think, again, because of the proximity of the communities, and when we were in the Merriwood, we played them. It became a little bit of a rivalry, maybe. That should be interesting with the chance now to have a guaranteed matchup each year. I think that's something that probably both communities will enjoy and hopefully develops into a nice rivalry.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. We look forward to Pittsville football. Always a lot of fun. If you get down here to Pittsville, watch a game here. The crowd's amazing. If you can't, keep an eye on our schedule at onfocus.news/sports. We'll be catching them throughout the year. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in.